Okay, take two. It's been long enough that I didn't hit the streaming button right. So sorry, we're a few minutes late. I've clearly had some technical difficulties today because it's been a minute since I've been on stream. But I'm so excited to be back with my friend Susan today. We're going to just run the intro real quick and then bring her on and we're going to get started. Hi, I'm Nicole, and as you have probably guessed, I have ADHD. I live and breathe all things ADHD in my personal, family, and professional life. I have a background in psychology and special education, and I've gained a lot of knowledge over the years about ADHD, what it really is, how it touches every aspect of your life and the life of your child, as well as a wealth of information and strategies for living with ADHD and parenting kids with ADHD. In this community, we share stories, we learn together, and we support each other as we navigate all things ADHD. Welcome. All right. Welcome to my good friend, Dr. Susan Blumberg. Susan, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself a little bit? It's been a minute since we've had you on.
I'm so pleased to be back here, Nicole. I'm Dr. Susan Blumberg. I was a special education advocate for 40 years. Amazing. Retired 2
that
years
was
ago.
word, right?
Yes. I was formerly a licensed clinical psychologist for children, adolescents, and families. And for the last 10 years, I've been a life coach for teens and young adults and their families, helping them work on executive functioning skills, communication skills, and launching into the next stage of their life, whether that's high school, college, or into adulthood.
Thank you so much for being here. Susan and I met about 4 years ago over on Clubhouse.
Oh my God.
A thing. And we just really got along and our approaches to things really aligned, and we've been working together in some capacity in this kind of education type format ever since then, with a few breaks because life happens. My 2024 got so far away from me, it was like, yeah, ridiculous. Good things happened, crazy things happened, but ADHD certainly got the best of me for a little while. So happy to be back. Today we're continuing our executive function series and talking about emotional regulation. A big problem for those of us with spicy brains. So I guess let's start with just kind of the most basic definition of what emotional regulation is. You want to give us a definition, Susan?
Sure. So for anyone, neurotypical or neurodivergent, emotional regulation is the same thing. It's the ability to manage your emotions in any given situation in order to be able to manage what's coming at you, whether that's school, home, work, parenting, relationships. It's being able to manage all of the major emotions, right? We have sad, mad, happy, right? The usual ones, but also frustration, exasperation, feeling overwhelmed, being able to manage those emotions so that we can accomplish the tasks we need to accomplish.
Awesome. So we talked about, this is a skill that is a thing for everyone, right? But what is the thing that makes this so difficult for those of us who have spicy brains?
Well, I think
you go first.
Yeah, I'm sorry. There are three issues if you have a neurospicy brain. The first is that being able to identify your emotions is much more difficult. The second is that your skills and abilities to manage emotions, in other words, what you might be filled up too quickly, you might be overwhelmed or flooded with emotions more quickly than you can manage them. And the third thing is learning how to calm your overloaded brain.
Right. So we've got kind of 3 stages of difficulty. And I guess we talk a little bit about, the differences in with neurodevelopmentally different brains, right? Is that frontal lobe development, which is where all of the executive functions live, including emotional regulation. Um, so it comes naturally more difficult for us than for neurotypical people.
I'm going to interrupt you because
Okay.
it actually starts with your lizard brain,
Well, yes, with
because
the
that's what
amygdala.
overwhelms you.
Sure.
So we're not getting to the frontal lobe yet. The
Right. The
reason you get
frontal lobe comes
overwhelmed,
in
right,
with,
is that
yes.
your amygdala, where emotions are created, and then your fight, flight, or freeze response kicks in
Mhm.
much more quickly. And so it's these automatic processors that flood you,
Right.
flee, flight, fight,
Fight, flight,
flight,
freeze,
or
fawn.
freeze, right, kicks in way before your frontal lobe gets any
Right.
messages at all.
Which makes it so that your frontal lobe can't do what it is trying to
Correct.
do.
Correct.
And then the secondary problem that the frontal lobe isn't great at doing it anyway. So we got
Exactly.
kind of 2 stages of problem areas, right?
So let's talk about some examples.
Sure.
Nicole, do you want to start?
Yeah, so I mean I can think of just this last week with my kids, right? We got off Christmas break. They go back to school, right? So Christmas break is a time where our systems and our organizations, their routines, their schedules are all kinds of disrupted, right? You have holidays, we're all sleeping in. We got family in town, so we've got a lot of fun activities we're doing, but nobody knows kind of when or what we're doing until maybe an hour before, because all of the women in my family have ADHD. So planning is not our strength. We fly by the seat of our pants. We have a lot of fun, but we might not know what we're doing in the next hour until 10 minutes before it's time to leave. So, that we all, as much as my kids love having a break from school, I do not love breaks from school because it is complete and utter chaos and we're just putting out fires all the time, right? But then they have to go back to school and it's another transition, right? Back to routines, getting back up in the morning. It's freaking freezing out there. It was 5 degrees when I was driving my kids to school this morning. And they get back to school and into these routines, and all of a sudden, the things that they were managing 2 weeks ago, they're not managing again, right? And so my youngest in particular is very affected by this. So he gets home from school on that first day back to school, and my natural instinct is I want to jump right into all of our routines, right? Okay, we got to do your homework and you're practicing. We're going to do this, that, and the other. And he walks in the door, and I can see that is not the way we need to process through this, right? He is, like you said, overloaded from having to work so hard all day, even though he's been doing really well. He's built up a bunch of skills. Going back to that routine has overwhelmed his coping strategies, right? So he comes home and someone starts giving him a list of tasks, more demands on him, or his teenage 13-year-old middle child brother who pushes everyone's buttons starts needling. We were going from 0 to explosion immediately, right? He had kind of exhausted all of his ability to maintain by how hard he was working during the day at school. That's probably my most recent example. But it can happen, in anytime there's sensory overwhelm, we go to a new place and there's new things to expect, or we're having to try a lot of new things, or all things that kind of require more effort on those systems can make him less able to manage those emotional outbursts.
Mhm. So I think that's a really excellent example. I think we can even zero in within the
Sure.
school day itself. So if you've been
Yes.
having unstructured holidays and now you're back in school where you have to switch every hour from one class to the next class to the next class, where teachers are not going to necessarily make allowances for
Right.
imposing routine back on students. Even teachers who are generally good about providing sensory breaks or accommodations, they don't have a lot of leeway. It's time to pull out your math book. It's time to do your independent reading. In high school, we have to, get back into the curriculum. After break, usually there's some review time, but then the bell rings and you've got 4 minutes to get to your next class.
Right.
And so there's not a lot of flexibility for our kids to adjust what we're calling their emotional regulation, which is that they don't have time to they don't have the luxury, I'm going to call it, to take those breaths and have a sensory break and be able to flip their mind from biology to English to algebra 2 to physical education to
Right.
computer science. They're going boom, 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 boom. And then what happens, and you kind of fluffed over this, you want to impose that to them at home.
Right. Because
What
I'm sick of us
they've
not
done,
having routines. Right. So,
right, what they've done is used all their emotional regulation skills to hold themselves together at school.
yep.
And then what happens at home, and for some reason this continues to surprise parents, they have to let go of all that structure that they've imposed on themselves.
Right.
And then they come home and lose it.
Yeah.
And
It's
so,
in, and well, and you think about kind of the beginning of the school year, right? When teachers are setting those routines, there is a lot more flexibility and
yes,
time for students to adjust. But when you come back from a break, the expectation is you already know this stuff. We're just jumping right back in. And for our kids who have, that those transitions between different types of structure, even if you're able to keep a good structure at home during a break, it's still a transition, right? Or
yes,
going from loosey goosey to now routine, they're both these kind of big changes that they have to get back into. And this, teachers are not necessarily great. They're better in elementary school of understanding that, like, oh, or maybe we're not going to make a lot of changes to
yes.
plans that first week back, give them time to kind of come back in. But when you get into secondary, you don't
No.
have that.
And I
Occasionally,
wish,
if you have a big change in your schedule and you have a new teacher, like you'll be
yes.
getting new routines with them. But the general expectation is how this works.
And I'm sorry that we couldn't talk to you parents about this prior to school starting, even you, Nicole, because
Sure.
what we could have done is started prepping our kids. We could
Right.
have reminded them. We could have started working on, now here's what our home routine is going to be when
Mhm.
you get back. Because the best answer for this emotional regulation problem is prepping them.
Right.
It's what we
Knowing
call
what's
front
coming,
loading.
preparing for situations, teaching skills, giving them so that when they're in that moment of fight or flight, when the anxiety bubbles up and when it starts to get too much, they don't have to use those frontal lobes to think so much for a solution, right? They've got a solution that they can just pull out.
Exactly. And part of this is, my family, I have I didn't put this in my introduction. I have two young adult children, 25 and 29. They're both twice exceptional. They carry multiple disability labels, and they're both highly or profoundly gifted. And so this particular combination makes things in some ways even more difficult, because it's easy to fall in the trap of, when they're using their giftedness skills, they're both very bright, very verbal, and you can talk to them about so many things at an advanced level.
Right.
And then when their deficits kick in, it's easy to get frustrated.
Right.
And it's easy to fall in the trap of just saying, well, you're so smart. Why can't you work through this? And so, one of the real issues with emotional dysregulation, okay, to say the opposite phrase, what really is happening with our kids, is to fall into the trap of saying, well, you did it 2 weeks ago. Why can't you do it now?
Yes.
You can do it in school. Why can't you do it at home? You can do it in English class. Why can't you do it in math class?
Right.
And
expecting those skills to carry over and not taking into account capacity of any given moment, right? This is a problem we come up with a lot when we're working with schools, especially with these twice exceptional kids, right? I have 3 twice exceptional kids myself. They are all currently on IEPs, but 2 of them, we had to fight very hard to get them. And because they're not academic goals, right? Everything is executive functioning based, but they desperately need that support. And schools don't know very well how to deal with that. They don't know how to
that should
they're
be a
getting
separate
better
conversation.
Yes.
I want to focus on the emotional
But right.
dysregulation.
So, I mean, we were having this discussion just last week in a behavior intervention plan review of, well, he's been doing so great at going to this recess with other kids. So now let's add in another recess. Well, the other recess they want to add in is right after lunch. It's twice as long as the other recess, and there are 600 kids on the playground at the time. So it was like, whoa, just because he's doing well when there's 300 kids on the playground for 10 minutes doesn't mean that he's going to be able to handle going from the lunchroom to a 25-minute recess with twice as many kids, right? That's too many variables that we're changing. So we've got to, adapt this in a way that is a little more incremental, because those skills, he may not have the capacity all the time to do the same thing. And it can come just from if there was a rough day at school. I've got one kid in particular who is my internalizer. And I don't know what's harder, the one who throws things and screams, or the one who just bottles it all in and you have to dig it out of them, right?
Equally hard.
It'll be days of, I know something's up because he's more moody. He's pushing other people's buttons. He's getting angry at things that wouldn't normally be a problem, just those little all the little red flags that I know from being his mother for 13 years. I know there's something that happened, but he will not tell me what it is, right? And so his ability to regulate those emotions when he's bottling up something that happened at school, particularly if it's a social thing, he gets really upset, and kind of spins out on something happened with a friend. I have lost that friend. They're never going to speak to me again. All right. He spirals down that. He's not able to handle his annoying little brother, right? He does not have the capacity anymore because his brain is fixating on this thing. So until we can get to that root problem, work through it, find a solution, get the anxiety calmed down, I can give as many consequences and extra jobs in the world for the way he's treating the other family members. it's going to keep happening until we get to that source. So oftentimes that dysregulation of emotion can be a clue for us that there's something else going on that we need to figure out.
Very good point. And you're bringing up a segue that I was getting to earlier, which is how we as parents react to our children's dysregulation can be key to addressing the issue.
Yes.
And what's really important, if our kid is fighting with one of the other kids, if a student in the classroom is acting out towards another student, sometimes the way we as adults respond to that dysregulation can be light day versus night, make a difference in how we can help that child respond to the interventions we're giving. There are two things I want to say about this. The first is it's very important not to retaliate, punish, give negative consequences, whatever phrase you want to use, to this child for behavior that's a result of their disability. And that's what happens, whether we're parents, teachers, coaches. We don't always recognize, as we might with a neurotypical child, where we respond with discipline or consequences. And as you said, give punishments or time out. If it's a behavior that's a result of their emotional dysregulation, negative consequences will never work.
Right.
You can put them in timeout. You can take away their phone. You can, ground them, and it will never change the behavior, because this is not a result of a choice or willpower or any other conscious decision by the child. It's a result of an emotional dysregulation that has to do with the neurological wiring and chemistry in their brain. And that doesn't respond to punishment of any kind, ever.
Right.
Well, I can't say that more strongly.
Yeah. And, I'm going to put a note down because I have a question to ask you about it later, but I want to stay on this train.
So I want to give my second point.
ADHD.
So that's the first point. Punishment, negative consequences, discipline will never work. That's why these clip up and down things, totally useless in classrooms.
Yeah, they're the worst.
Right? Punishment at home
public shaming.
Will never work. Never change the behavior. The second piece of it is if we lose our temper with our child and we become emotionally dysregulated when our child is, we will escalate the situation instead of de-escalate it. So yelling back when our child is dysregulated is only going to snowball and escalate the situation.
And now we have the double problem of the parent with ADHD parenting the children with ADHD, which is extremely common.
Neurotypical parents do this as well.
Well,
because they feel helpless, they don't know what to do. And if you have a neurodivergent parent with a neurodivergent child, then we've geometrically,
which most of the time you do, because we know that
it's genetic.
It is highly genetic, right? So, I mean, that's how I got to my diagnosis in my late 30s, was when my third child was diagnosed with ADHD, and the psychiatrist looked at me and said, "So, which of you is it?" When the second one got diagnosed, he said, "Okay, well, if you have two kids who have ADHD, there's probably a 70% chance that one of the parents does." I said, "Okay." Then number 3 got diagnosed, and I got a hard look. And I said,
it's hard.
It's probably me.
So coming back to the issue of the emotional regulation, it's so hard for the parents. Whoops.
We lost your camera.
Yes, I did. Hold on. I played with it. There we go. I fidgeted with my camera wire. What a bad choice.
That's why I have this in my hand.
Yeah. What we come down to is parents needing to do parenting work. It's not the
Yes.
child necessarily I have to work with. It's the parent I have to work with,
Right.
right? Because it's when they learn to regulate themselves, their ability to regulate will allow them to work with their dysregulated child.
Right. So
What was your question?
let me sure. Let me still put a pin in that one for a second
Okay,
because I
go
want to
ahead.
talk about this for a minute more. So this is something that obviously I struggle with quite a bit because when I'm overwhelmed, when things are stressful, when all of the kids are dysregulated, right? It's really hard for me to maintain my composure. So being able to recognize in myself when I am starting to go that way, right? And this is where things like cognitive behavioral can help, journaling, but becoming aware of how your body is responding and knowing when to take a step back. And it's okay to let the thing go for a minute and come back to it. In fact, that is oftentimes the best way to do things, right?
So
Wait
I
for the
recommend,
kid, help the
go ahead.
kid get regulated down, and then you can address whatever happened, what's causing it. Because again, when their brain is flooded with that adrenaline, they're not able to logically process things with you. They're not able to, all that conversation is really just adding to the input that's coming out them that they're not able to deal with, right? So finding strategies to bring it back down. Sometimes that's sensory. Oftentimes in our house, it's screen related. Just go watch 20 minutes of a YouTube video and get that brain to kind of calm down, get that nervous system to calm down. This little lady back here, Charlotte, say hi. That's her primary job. She is my 9-year-old's autism service dog, and she provides that regulation. She does deep pressure therapy. She lays down on my son's chest, puts her face right up here and starts licking his ear, and his whole body, you can see it just go here and just melt. So strategies can be different, but having a tool bag and teaching your kids what those things are that help them. For my other son, it's music. For my other one, it's just he needs to be away from all people. He is my little like vampire. He goes and just like closes himself in a dark, cold room with like 4 blankets on him. He has his window open right now. It's 15 degrees outside. He likes it cold. And once he's calm, then we can go in and talk about, okay, how did this start? What's the problem? Let's come up with a solution. And then sometimes there may be a consequence that needs to happen because our kids do need to learn that their actions have consequences. It may or and that they need to, apologize to people and fix things when they break them and things like that, right? That they need to take responsibility for what has happened, knowing that that consequence isn't necessarily going to prevent it from happening again. We're just teaching them how to be good human
Well, and
beings,
we can
right?
talk about natural consequences versus
Yes.
punishment in another session.
Yes, yes, yes.
Let's talk some more about strategies. So my
Okay.
daughter, in addition to a heavy weighted blanket, we made her a nest. What we did is we sewed 2 twin sheets together and we stuffed them with those big foam blocks like you see in gymnastics arenas. And she can drag that wherever she is and sits on that with multiple blankets as well. She wears noise canceling headphones much of her life. When she can't wear those, she wears loops, which are noise canceling earbuds,
Yep.
which she finds enormously helpful.
They
She
have
will,
really cheap versions of those that are silicone on Amazon too that we buy
yeah, but
because the
they're
kids
not always
lose
as
them like crazy.
effective.
They're
Yeah.
they're not quite
Read
as effective,
reviews.
but if you have kids, like, I mean, your daughter's older and can keep track of things a little bit better.
Yes.
My
True.
kids are not and
She's had
have
them
the
since,
ADHD on top
yeah,
of
she's had them since
things.
high school.
Yeah, and they lose everything. So we
Yes.
sometimes get the cheap silicone ones because
And
you get
replace them
10
more
pairs of them
frequently.
for $20 and you can stick them in
So
every bag you have.
it depends on the kid that you have,
Mhm.
but well, if we're talking about emotional dysregulation interventions, so she needs to have a lot of bodily pressure. She also has one of those spandex tubes that she can wriggle into, which gives her deep body compression
Mhm.
when she needs it. Um, they're easy to make. You just have to buy heavyweight spandex fabric
Mhm.
and sew it a size smaller than you think you should.
Yes,
To,
swings and, we have, like, a little pod that hangs from the ceiling that's, like, got an opening about this big.
yeah.
It's not stretchy, but he can spin in it. We also have, got Christmas this year got a spinny chair
Oh,
that is
nice.
just
Very
on the
nice.
ground, and that thing will spin like crazy. If you look up sensory spinning chair on, Amazon, you'll find them.
What I want to explain for parents who have missed the connection between emotional dysregulation and the kinds of strategies we're recommending. One of the reasons that these types of interventions are helpful is that sensory input, particularly proprioceptive and vestibular.
Mhm.
Okay, so proprioceptive is knowing where your body is in space.
Mhm, that's the
Vestibular,
spinning and the swinging and those sorts of things
right?
work on proprioceptive.
Vestibular is balance,
Mhm.
and proprioceptive is also the nest and the tight spandex tube.
Mhm.
Um, this kind of heavy pressure on your body can re regulate your back of your brain and your amygdala so that the emotional dysregulation will calm down. And so,
Yeah.
not everyone understands that connection.
Right. What
So
it
that's
is
why we're
that
not
overload,
suggesting
right?
talk to your kid. We're
Right.
saying don't talk to your kid. Give them physiological input, such as these sensory strategies we're recommending, because the sensory strategies will help re regulate the neurological imbalance in your
Mhm.
child that's causing the emotional dysregulation.
Well, most of the things we've listed off have been, well, apart from like the noise canceling, have been more sensory seeking type things. Personally, I'm a sensory avoider. So that's a little different. That I describe it as if there's too many things touching me, right? Like I can feel my socks all day, every day. That noise never goes away. If my sock is in the wrong position, if it's clumped up or there's a wrinkle under my toe or my bra is digging in or anything on my shirt is itchy or there's a bad tag, the that input, because of my ADHD, I don't have the ability to, well, not that I don't have the ability. My brain has a difficult time filtering out all of the input and determining what's important and what's not. So all of that input is coming in at me at the same time as like my conversation with you. Like I can hear my sock just as loud as I can hear my friend talking to me, right? And when I get in that overwhelm, when I can feel that dysregulation coming on, I got to get all of that sensory annoying stuff off of me. So I'm not someone who likes a heavy blanket. I strip down and put on the comfiest pajamas I have that are soft and don't itch. and I'm very auditorily sensitive, which is a problem when you have explosive children, right? They're really loud. And so I have to retreat and block out all that noise. I use my AirPods a lot just as noise cancellation, but also I have something running on them that can help me to block out the noise of the house that is not necessarily inappropriate, but can become agitating to me because they're doing fine. They don't need to be silent, right? They're just being kids and they're roughhousing or whatever. They're my son's favorite thing right now is he has a laundry, like a rope laundry basket that he puts on top of a skateboard and puts his stuff in and rolls it like a little go-kart all over the house. And so it's just this repetitive back and forth across our main floor all day.
Oh,
The noise
no.
drives me insane. So I know that one of my regulation strategies is I got block some of that out so that I can maintain my regulation, right? So you can have these seeking types of things that help, but also sometimes it's taking away stimulus and it's kind of figuring out what works for you. There's also kind of that list of, are you tired? Are you hungry? When's the last time you had a drink of water? Have you eaten good protein that day? Or are you coming down off a sugar high, right? These are all physical things that can impact our ability to manage emotional stuff.
Excellent. So Aviva is both sensory over and under.
Mm-hmm.
And so she stopped wearing a bra some years ago and only wears camisoles.
Good for her.
And stopped shaving.
See, I have to shave because the hair's on the
bother
bottom,
you.
on the
Yeah,
pants.
she stopped shaving.
I'd rather die.
She'll complain of a headache and I'll tell her to go eat instead of
Yes.
taking Tylenol because I know it means she hasn't had protein.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a very excellent suggestion that you're talking about. And that, again, neurotypical people, they see things at face value because that's the way they process the world.
Right.
And we have to look at our children or students differently and think through what could be causing their dysregulation. So,
Yeah.
for example, my daughter, who is Aviva, you'll hear me use her name many times, anyone who's listening, because she has so many of these issues, as does Nicole's children.
Yes. I try not to use their names. I call
have
them
Aviva's
child
permission.
1, 2, 3
Yeah.
because they're not adults who have
Yes.
given consent
I have
to
my
be on
children's
the
permission
internet.
to share.
Yes.
And she may even join us now and again and speak up for herself. She likes
I would
to
love
do
that.
that. She gets interested.
That's great.
So what she has said is that what's been important to her is being allowed to speak up for herself, and we'll have sessions on how to help our kids learn to advocate,
Yes.
to be able to say, I can't do this, and be allowed to leave a situation.
Right.
And
Yeah,
so
and
for
that can be
parents,
extremely
they want to say,
difficult.
no, you're going to sit here and listen to me.
Right.
And our kids have to be able to say, no, I'm done. You know, there's a cartoon that I really love where a kid, very fat kid with a very small head, raises their hand in the middle of the classroom and says, may I be excused? My brain is full.
That's awesome.
I just love it. It's one of my favorite cartoons.
Yeah.
And one of the things I have to teach parents a lot is that their kids may not be able to process information, feelings, situations in the same way that we can.
Yep.
And so where we might have a expectation, our kids can sit through dinner, our kids can sit through a movie, our kids can sit through
I've never had a single child sit through dinner
with grandparents.
Mm-hmm.
That our kids have to be allowed to say, I don't want that hug. I can't sit through dinner. I can't stay in, I have to leave this restaurant. This happens with my 29-year-old daughter. We'll
Sure.
be out for a meal with our friends or relatives. I'm having a wonderful visit. And my daughter will say, even at 29, I have to leave now and I have to get up and leave.
It's so hard sometimes, especially when we're doing things that we feel like they should be grateful for, right?
And there's
So
the dirty word. Wait, I'm going to
right.
interrupt
No,
you.
I know.
You can say any curse word you like to me, but should
I know.
is a
I know.
word I don't allow. And parents, I want you to listen to this when you're listening to this session.
Well, and I do it to myself too. Stop shooting all over yourself,
Should
Nicole.
is about an ideal utopia.
Yeah.
I shouldn't be fat. I should,
I should be able to fold my laundry and put it away.
It has nothing to do with reality. And
No.
anytime we say should about our families and our kids, then we have to stop ourselves and give ourselves a good shake and start over.
It can be really difficult. I mean, this happened. So over Thanksgiving, we went to Disneyland with my extended family. So my parents, my sister, and her kids. It was a not totally last minute, but shortly planned trip because we got a formal diagnosis for my father that we knew was coming, but that, he's now officially got that dementia diagnosis. We have been through this process before with his mother, who had very early, like in her late 50s, early 60s, Alzheimer's, and lived with us. So we kind of all had this automatic response of kind of dread, right? Of knowing what's coming and wanting to kind of gather and group and create as many memories and, as we possibly can. So we were all planning on going to California to my sister's for Thanksgiving. Anyway, we decided we're going to go to Disneyland. Disneyland is really a lot, right? It's a long day of walking, it's crowds, it's sensory overload. And we expected some issues from one of my kids, from my youngest, who really struggles, but we had Charlotte with us and he did awesome. But my oldest, he is definitely an introvert, and he's the one that likes to hole up in a cave, and he needs his own time and his own space. And when he's done, he's done. And he's always been that way. He's become less and less that way over the years. I've been shocked at the number of times that I have to drag him away from social situations because it was always him nagging me to stop talking to all the parents so he could go home, which is great. But he was, by about 6:00, he was over it and wanted to leave. And that was difficult, right? Because we're trying to spend as much time as we can with these grandparents. My mother paid for the trip, so there's this little bit of like, you need to stick it out for grandma. While he's also like, he was really done and needed a break. So, there was one day where we sent him back to our rental house and we finished the day. Those of us who wanted to keep staying, and those who wanted to go left. It was hard for me. It was hard for me. It was frustrating for me. I'm a person who wants to be there from rope drop till the fireworks go, right? I am a seeker when it comes to those sorts of, I like roller coasters. I don't want to miss a day of it.
Aviva loves roller coasters.
Like, I love Disneyland. My son needs breaks, and it's hard for me to understand that. His dad is more of an introvert, and so he understands that side of him a little better, and so he went back with him and let me stay and keep going. But it can be really hard when we're in those kind of, this is a special occasion. This is something we don't get to do all the time. I don't know then when the next time we'll be at Disneyland is. We need to live up every single moment of it. And we've spent all this money, and you just want to leave. And that can be really hard as a parent to accept that that's what our kid needs, and that he's not going to have great memories of this trip if I keep forcing him to
Right.
continue when he's uncomfortable. So getting back to what are the goals of what we're doing here, and have we met those goals? That's important. If the goal is I want him to have a positive memory of this trip with his grandpa, and I make him stay and be miserable for another 4 hours, he's just going to remember the miserable part. He's not going to remember all the fun parts earlier in the day. It's not going to be a positive memory for him. So, knowing what our goals are in those situations, and when we start getting the shoulds, when we start wishing our family looked like someone else's family, right? Realizing what our goals are and how, whether or not we have accomplished those, how we can accomplish those things, even if it doesn't look like what everyone else is able to do.
You've made so many good points there. I can't even keep up with them.
My brain goes like
Yep.
this.
No. I'm gonna pick on three, and there might be a
Okay.
fourth. One is don't not do this tremendous thing
Right.
just because of the limitations of your kid.
Mm-hmm.
Go for it anyway.
Yes.
Second thing is let go of your inappropriate expectations.
Yep.
Because you want him to have the good memories and not have them be spoiled by the tensions.
Right.
The third thing is you'll have better memories of the trip.
Yep.
If you follow 1 and 2.
Right.
If you still go for it, and if you do it so your kid can be happy. So
Yeah.
my daughter's going to turn 30, and she wants to go to Harry Potter World at
Ooh,
Universal
I'm
Studios.
in.
I'm not physically capable of doing it. And so we're going to work it out. Maybe my son and his partner will take her, and my husband will go along. I'm not physically able to do all the walking.
Yeah.
And she has autism and sensory processing disorder. She has a neurological disorder that limits her physical capabilities as well. And we're going to make it happen.
Yeah.
We're going to make it
I mean,
happen. Maybe
it goes
we'll
back
go
to this kind of
3 days and she'll
pre-planning.
spend a half day each day at the park, you know?
Yeah, sometimes it goes to that pre-planning, and that, we talk about all the time. We're making accommodations. We're making accommodations to be able to do these amazing things. Sometimes that makes it a little more expensive because we have to pay for an extra day and take it slower. And sometimes that means, like there are going to be differences. And I'm not going to lie and pretend that I don't often just wish it could be easier, right? And that we didn't have
Oh,
to
all
do
the time.
that, we
But
could just take a 2-day trip and
how could
have
I
it
say
just
no
be
to her? She
right.
is a Harry Potter, uh, I can't think of what the word is,
Potterhead.
fanatic. She reads fanfic. She's Ravenclaw. We
Me
went
too.
to the Harry Potter convention when it was here in Colorado 2 years ago. She has embroidered herself the shield for
Awesome.
Ravenclaw. She carries Harry Potter everything. I mean, when the books
I
came
can
out, we went
completely
to the
understand.
midnight releases.
I did too. I love it.
She is a total Potterhead. How could I say no to this? So
Right.
my job is simply to make it happen in a way like
Yeah.
you did that's going to make her happy.
Well, I will say Universal has great, they still have really great disability access
Yes.
programs.
So
Disney
we're going to
is
do
struggling with
everything we
theirs right now,
can
but
to make her happy.
yeah,
This is the only thing she wants for her birthday. I'm going to give it to her the best way we know how.
I love it.
Yeah. So our
Okay,
time is nearly up.
I know.
It's gone so fast as always. Nicole, what have we missed?
I don't know. I made notes, but I don't know. I feel like sometimes the conversation just takes it where it takes us. But I think we could maybe just sum up with a couple of actionable tips, right? The first is, whether it's for ourselves or for our kids, we need to identify, right? I don't like to use the word triggers because I feel like everyone uses the word trigger and it's lost all meaning. But figure out what those things are that make it difficult for you to stay in functioning brain and not kick into that amygdala brain turning off thing, right? Pre-planning is huge.
Huge.
That's not something people with ADHD are great at. So it is something that a skill we have to work on, is something we have to be very conscious of. What's happening tomorrow? How can I prep my kid for it? How can I prep myself for it? What am I going to do to set myself up for success? I'm going to take my meds at the right time. I'm going to make sure I have a good breakfast if I've got a lot going on, right? Those sorts of things that can set us up to be able to have the tools to regulate, right? And then I think that it is very important to find the strategies that then, if we're there, what helps bring us back down to where we can think again. And so remember not to be too hard on ourselves and not to try and continue to resolve whatever's going on when brains are no longer involved, right? It can be hard. This was a question, and I think it's something we'll talk about on another day, is kind of the dynamics within the family with the siblings, right? It's not fair. He doesn't have to do this. He never gets in trouble when he does that, because they don't always see everything that happens. They don't understand necessarily that, yeah, I'm not going to punish him right now for hitting you, because the more I say and do, the worse it's going to get. I got to wait till he calms down and then talk
Good.
about.
Let's have a sibling session.
Yeah. So I think having kind of a siblings and family dynamic session would be excellent. I lost where I was going, but
no, I think you were doing a great job summarizing the highlights. The next thing I would add is, remember that sensory interventions, right, whether they're for sensory seekers or sensory avoiders, depending on your person, are the best intervention for emotional dysregulation. And the next one is that parents need to be on top of their emotional regulation in order to manage their children.
Yeah.
Which puts more pressure on us, but that's because we're the adult.
Yes. And even when it's difficult for us, we're adults and we got to figure out our own crap. So if that means going to get to therapy or finding a coach or reading the books or making sure that you're doing the things for yourself to keep you as mentally fit as you can, and stop shoulding all over the place.
Excellent. I love it.
Okay, well, I feel like we could talk about this for hours and hours and hours, and we have, and we will in the future, but we'll try and keep this stream to an hour on Tuesdays. Those of you who are here in the chat, thank you for being here. Make sure you hit that like button. If you haven't subscribed and you want to know when we are going live again or when new videos will be posted, hit that subscribe button and turn on your notifications so YouTube lets you know. If you're here on Replay Crew, we love you too. Leave your questions and comments. If you have questions or things you'd like us to talk about on an upcoming stream, please put those in the comments. We do collect them in a little notebook and we try and address questions. So if something's come up or you have a question on an unrelated topic, put that there too. Susan, tell the people where they can find you.
It's drsusanblumberg.com. Very easy. You see my name right in front of you there under my face. All one word, drsusanblumberg.com. And I'll be here every Tuesday with Nicole taking questions live.
Thank you so much for being here. And we will run the outro and see y'all soon. If I can find it. I changed my buttons. Yes, always my favorite. Thank you for watching. If you haven't already, please like, comment, and subscribe to the channel.
This video is not a substitute for counseling, psychotherapy, medical, or mental health care. The information and advice shared here should not be used in place of any form of diagnosis, treatment, or therapy. Information provided here does not involve diagnosis or treatment of medical or mental or psychological disorders. If you feel the need for professional support, please seek a local professional in your area. This video is for educational and entertainment purposes only.